Hey guys, tonight I watched the Chernobyl Diaries. Um, this is from Oren Peli, who is the guy who created the Paranormal Activity franchise. Well, he made the first one, and the franchise kind of went from there. This is a guy that has done very well on making budget movies, horror movies on a budget. And this one is definitely not an exception, although it definitely had a higher budget than Paranormal Activity movies. But this is a guy that does very well on making horror movies that are efficient and effective in what they're trying to do. And this one was no exception. You know, this is a movie that had what I thought was a very, very interesting premise, focusing on a nuclear fallout and more importantly an abandoned town. Basically, this is four friends that um, meet up in Kiev. One of the older brothers is living in Russia, and they decide to go on, a couple of little day adventures. And one of those day adventures, they find a guy who does what he calls extreme tours. Character's name is Yuri, I can't remember the guy who plays him, but he's a guy that I've seen in multiple movies, and he always plays such a stereotypical big ex-military Russian type guy. He's great. He's so good in it. That his character was one of the best things about this movie. Mainly, this guy does what he calls extreme tourism. And basically what he's doing is he's taking small groups of people and sneaking them into Pripyat, which is a town just outside of Chernobyl where all the families that work at the Chernobyl nuclear plant lived. It's a town that's been abandoned for 30-something years, 35 years I believe it is, something like that. And he takes them into town for a couple of hours and they get to look around. And it's literally a town that has been just completely abandoned. The people of that town had like 5 minutes to gather stuff together and get out of the town. 50,000 people just abandoned a town in a day. It's a fascinating story. It's a fascinating concept to hold a horror movie in there. It gives you, to me, I was looking at that storyline and I was like, okay, this is a really interesting opportunity for a small group of actors to be able to do a horror movie and not, us not have to worry about anything else, because there's literally nobody else there. You can keep your focus on that small group of characters. And I thought it was an interesting approach. It was also an interesting approach in the way of, where the scare is going to come from. They could be coming from anything, anywhere. The director could be very, very open as to how he wanted to interpret the scares. Is it monsters? Is it animals? Is it psychological? They went with creatures. And I put the quotes around because that's actually what they're called in the subtitles. But you don't really know what they are. You don't really see them. It's always dark, or they're always in shadow. They're most likely supposed to be mutations from the people who were still alive after the Chernobyl incident. But it worked that you never saw them. Again, it's the whole idea of kind of doing a high quality, low budget horror movie. You don't see the creatures, you hear them. What little scares there were in the movie were efficient in what they were trying to do. They worked very well, mostly jump scares, but more just kind of creepiness, kind of a general creepiness and unease. But most of that really didn't come until the end. Most of the movie, the scares were jump scares or sounds or things in the shadow it wasn't until the end when it actually became like a chase and they were actually trying to survive. They were trying to get out. Something was behind them the whole time. And it built some nice tension, you know? The very end, they finally get rescued, and, nobody survives. Sorry, spoiler. But again, it worked. And one of the things that I really liked about this is it was short. This movie is 86 minutes long. And it was the perfect length of time. It never felt long. It also didn't feel like they left anything out. It was kind of a slow build up until the action, but that was okay because the slow build was interesting. You know, it was interesting in the fact that you were getting a little bit of a history lesson of the town and of Chernobyl while you're getting this setup for what's going to be, a horror movie. And I say what's going to be because the beginning really isn't anything scary. There are some little creepy moments and kind of surprising little things that happen, but it's not until you really get about halfway through that everything starts to happen. And then about 20 minutes after that, like once, I think it was like probably 12, 15 minutes before the movie ended is when all the action started ramping up, and then those last 10 minutes were just intense. It's just running and running and running and surviving, and then they get to the end, and oh, it's not quite done yet. There's still one more thing we have to do. But again, very effective use of a short a short time on the movie. The movie wasn't very long. They made great use of the time that they had. They made a very good use of the budget. They didn't have to worry about a lot of creature effects or anything because, again, you didn't really see most of them. There were some decent jump scares. The acting was fine. I thought it was pretty good for what it was doing. Although most of the characters were likable. I don't know, it's not a great movie, it's not a fantastic movie, it's not a horror movie that I'll throw into a repertoire of watching, like every year or anything, but I highly enjoyed it for what it is, and it's a good way to waste an hour and a half of your time, if you see it. It's really not bad. It's got some really good stuff in it. So, that's that, and I will see you next time.